All right, well, we are right at 10 o'clock, so let's get started here. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today on this Crush the Crisis webinar that we decided to put together as a partnership between Pearson-Kelly and Centric Consulting Group. Happy to have this group on here to have this conversation. We're going to start, when we talked about what we were going to do for this, we started talking about how much people are in this crisis mode. There's all this stuff that we have to plan for. We're working from home. There's all these different things there's challenges in our business, all that kind of stuff that's out there. But then we also talked about how we're kind of getting sick of that stuff. We're tired of this idea of we have to close up shop and someday we're going to come out and we're going to meet again and we're going to be out there again with each other. Let's start thinking about what opportunities maybe are there for our businesses. How is this going to change the landscape? So we want to talk about all of those different things. So we got together some experts from both companies here from Pearson-Kelly. We've got Chelsey and Brock from Pearson-Kelly, and then Matt and myself from Centric Consulting Group. And let's start off. I'm going to have the panelists just introduce themselves briefly. Chelsey, you want to start off?
Sure. I don't know about experts, but you got us four. So I'm Chelsey Bode. I'm the president of Pearson-Kelly Technology.
Okay. Brock?
I'm Brock Glidwell. I'm a vCIO at Pearson-Kelly Technology.
Okay. We're all V. You can drop the V from your beginning of your name. I think that's V right now.
It was part of the agreement when I signed up for the job. I have to keep the V.
Keep the V. They want to keep you as V as possible.
Cool now. It used to be a little bit of a hindrance internally, but now it's got a cool vibe.
Yeah. Matt?
Matt Griswold, Centric Consulting Group. Hey, there goes our sirens. You started with sirens. Right on cue. Did you see how I involved the city in my introduction there?
Yeah, the city of Matt's in Bolivar, I think, today, right?
That's right.
Good to see you got internet out there, Matt. That's great.
Bolivar's great.
We love Bolivar. And then my name is Don Harkey from Centric. So excited to have everyone here. So first of all, I'm going to throw a question over to Brock or Chelsey, either one of you that want to answer this one. I know we got questions early on about, hey, we're all working from home now. What are some of the best tools and things that we can be using? So what are some of the things that people have discovered, maybe not discovered yet?
Yeah, so I can take this one. We are relying internally on Microsoft Teams a lot more than what we did before. We were starting to kind of bring it in with some stuff to kind of cut down on the email chatter, throughout the day. But now we're doing all our meetings through Teams. We're meeting with clients virtually through Teams. And one of the great things about it is, it's got a paper trail with it, so you can see when your meeting's starting in. It gives us some accountability. It's been really positive.
And I'll chime in on Teams. One thing that was really cool, if you are running Microsoft Teams, you can run some backend analytics just to see how your office has changed their communication. So we've been talking as a leadership team about how we can kind of force more intentional communication through Teams and things like that and kind of get it away from email because the human brain can't focus as much when all of the noise is coming in through your traditional email medium. So what we looked at is February in comparison to March, we were down about 60% in email communication. This was without us mandating anything. This all happened organically, and it was like I about fell out of my chair. We were down 60% on email communication. We were up about 200% in video chat or video communication, and then Teams meetings, Teams chat. Everything just started getting more laser focused and more intentional about how we as an organization kind of organically shifted. So kind of cool thing to run if you have that opportunity.
Yeah, so you're saying like, I never meet anybody who says that, wow, I want more emails in my life. I've never said, if I just had 100 more emails to look at every day. So are we saying that maybe some of these other tools can even take the place of that in terms of email, communications? Like there's alternatives in terms of us creating a more deliberate communication cadence of how we talk to each other? Is that what your team is seeing right now?
Absolutely. I mean, even with the chat, I mean, our hope for today is that this is interactive and more roundtable and less structured. although we all need structure in our life right now because I know we're going crazy. I can hardly sit in this chair right now, but it does allow for that interaction. So when we're having meetings, let's say I'm popping into the sales teams meeting, there, as conversation like this is going on, there's banter going on that's also kind of building culture and building some kind of fun internal competition. It's just been a really cool way to see the type of communication shift.
Yeah. Matt, what kinds of things are you seeing in terms of clients communicating online? What's been the impact on the teams that you work with?
Well, I was actually gonna piggyback on the piggyback there that Chelsey had on Brock there, but with Microsoft Teams, I think there's so many different platforms, right? And I think the thing that we hear culturally from teams whenever this is going on is, can we please just pick a platform and just tell me what we're using and how we're using it? Because I'm getting emails, I'm getting text messages, I'm getting Slack, I'm getting, all of these different things. There's Skype, there's Zoom, there's Google Hangouts. I mean, what should I be paying attention to? And so when Don talked about communication cadence there, just kind of creating a baseline for, okay, so this is what we're going to use for this is what we're going to use for this. I think that even becomes more prevalent whenever you're working remotely like this. Pick a platform that works well for you, and then just make sure everybody is on the same page as far as which platform we're using.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because otherwise you start losing stuff, right? It's like, okay, I sent you that file, or how'd you send it to me? Well, I sent it in the Slack chat that we had before, and then I emailed the second one to you, and then I put the other, and then I IM'd you to see if you got it, and then I called, and So
well, and I'm watching the chat there too, and Jamie says that she joined today because she's supporting 7 executives all working remotely, as well as managing a department of essential employees. And so when you're when you have 7 executives that you're supporting as administrative assistant, can you imagine? Because probably not all 7 of them want it the same way. So what do you want me to do for this versus here? And just having that communication cadence, that communication talk is really important to create a foundation for how are we doing this going forward.
Yeah, Chelsey, I love what you said too about the idea of deliberate communication. I've seen some teams that have actually seemed to be coming together around this crisis a little bit tighter than what they have in the past, which crises can do that. But I wonder how much of it is the technology and how much of it is the deliberateness of the communication. Any thoughts on that? Throw that out to the group.
Yeah, for us, I think it's a little of both. I do think that technology has kind of forced a different type of communication, as we just alluded to. But I also think that it's made us more aware of how much that we need to focus on some interaction when people aren't getting to be around people. And that's kind of what gets us our energy. At least most people get energy from being around other people. So we're more intentional about making sure cameras are on. We also are doing several more check-ins, and we're also combining different departments. And so we've had some phenomenal compliments from our own team saying, man, I had no idea what these other departments were doing until we all went mobile and we were forced into some of these daily check-ins or virtual happy hours. I actually know who I work with now, and we feel closer as a team than what we even felt when we were under one roof, and things that we never anticipated but have been outcomes of how we're communicating today. So I think it's a combination for us.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great thought. Yeah, I'm seeing that. I heard from some teams that we worked with yesterday were talking about that they've seen more cross-functional collaboration than that they had seen before. Some of that's driven by just the demands in the business. The group I was talking to had some limited sales, and so they were all having to work together to do some more things. But also the working remotely also kind of made them work together. We all sit in a group. We tend to just talk to people you sit with, or on a specific floor or in a specific area of the office. When you're all on the same kind of platforms, all working together, it does break down some of those barriers.
Yeah, and Don, I get to work with pretty much every aspect of our business, whether it be sales, service, and support. And, kind of understanding that different personalities are jumping on this. And, our sales folks are going a little crazy because they're used to being out and talking to people. And it comes out in bursts every once in a while. They'll have a moment, and, our service and support guys are really comfortable with this kind of, just ongoing chat, throughout the day. It's just kind of a streaming consciousness. They can jump back and forth between bands and right back into issues. So I think it's really kind of a good a lesson in how different people, they like to communicate. And I think that's something as we head back to the office eventually, that will be really interesting to see how that evolves. Because some of the stuff that's happened with those sales folks is it's forced them to be a little bit more intentional. Things that might have just happened in a conversation, they've kind of had to force themselves to put it down in writing and send it off to somebody, which has helped, their process, helped them make sure that they're not forgetting things. So I'm just fascinated by it. It's been awesome.
I think what Brock is also talking about there too of and Brock, I think we talked about this yesterday as well, but some of the things that we're doing now, we're not creating just for now, like we're creating for tomorrow. Some of these things that we're doing and we're adapting, I think they're going to become best practices for organizations going forward. In the chat, they're talking about that as well too. What will our deliverables look like, going forward? And I think we're going to see some changes within some of those deliverables out there. Chelsey, I thought it was interesting because you said most people get energy from being around other people, and I would say most also, but I'm also in that boat. I also know that there's some going, that Facebook meme that came out that was like introverts everywhere. Like, we're like, hey, like, this is great. Like, I don't have to be around people. I don't have to talk to people. And so there are those people. And Lee Flood is asking now, about those different personalities. And I think sometimes that's prevalent too on our video conferences that we get into. It seems like the first 15 minutes is us just, I don't know, there's nothing related to the agenda that we were there to talk about. But I think we need to give people the space that have been cooped up just to kind of do that. And there's one person, that sometimes is, maybe they'll even shut their video off, Bethany, but sometimes they'll also want to do it. They'll want to do it too. And so I think you have to be able to be creative and give people the space to be able to, okay, so what do you want to talk about? We don't have to follow an agenda. It doesn't have to be super structured right now. What are those things? And I think to Lee's point there, learning about different personalities, part of that, the first step, I think, is understanding that you in fact have different personalities, and how do I need to manage those folks differently? What do I need to give that person in order to keep them engaged as that wears off?
Yeah.
I actually kind of had a conversation with one of our sales reps where she said, I would have sent this as an email, and I made a call just because I was craving that interaction, and that opened up a new opportunity. So I think maybe as we go back, that's going to be some things where we're used to just shooting off an email and knocking it off our to-do list. Maybe we can really value that conversation, that human interaction. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's interesting that in the past, technology maybe have been seen almost as a barrier to human interaction, and now it's become our primary tool to creating it. How do we think that's going to change things moving forward after this crisis is over? I know, Brock, you said like you're really interested in fascinating as we're watching it. None of us have the exact right answer to this. But what do we think? How do you think it's going to change your business and how you supply your clients, for example?
I really think it's going to change everything for the better. I think we're going to be a little bit more open to meeting the customer where they're at, and understanding what their needs are, and knowing that some customers really are going to want, some clients are really going to want us to be right there in their office, and others might be super busy, and it's those meetings that are really hard to knock down, and they want to meet with us, but things keep coming up, and maybe we can just pop in a 20-minute, virtual conversation. I think it's going to allow us to be more flexible with the way that we work with our folks, and I think that's positive. Chelsey?
Yeah, I would agree. A couple specifics. I see certain generations that would have been very adverse to Zoom, Teams, BlueJeans, any of the platforms that you can virtually meet with, have been forced into adapting in this time. And now I see that generation that would have never in a million years taken a meeting that way, teaching other people on our team how to do it. And they're like loving it, and they're showing all the tricks, and they're like, oh, silly, you didn't mute your button, and that's down in the bottom, and they're super proud of themselves. So I think that we'll see a little bit of a shift there. Also, I was speaking to one of our sales reps yesterday that his territory demands that he drive about 50% of his day going from meeting to meeting. And he's basically giving feedback that he's getting so many more touches in, so much more efficient through virtually meeting. And I don't want to take away the importance of the face-to-face. I think that there's still some very important things to be said meeting in person, but I think it's going to change how often maybe we have to meet in person. And I think there's going to be some organizations that are not going to want to meet in person. So I think that it's going to also give us a more efficient outcome in what we can accomplish and how we accomplish it.
Yeah, I love that. I think it really hit me how much change things are going to change when I found out that my mother-in-law, who's in her 70s, was teaching her piano lessons over Skype. And she 3 weeks ago would never have thought about doing that, or would probably have known what Skype was. And she's adapted to it, and she's actually enjoys it. She's like, hey, I could do this a lot more. I could do more lessons. I could teach outside of my area now. I could go online. I could teach kids from other cities if we wanted to. So I mean, it has opened up a lot of possibilities.
I think I was on a call with a publication in North Carolina yesterday, and one of the salespeople said nobody's responding to my emails, so I'm trying to get creative. Where she is now she just sets her cell phone up on a tripod and like does a video message that they would just open, and then it's them. So they're still getting the nonverbals and the personal interaction. And she said, I started getting hits almost immediately, people responding back immediately to the video message versus just the standard email that was popping up in the inbox. So it is creating probably some of those best practice. I would bet that's going to be one example of one of those things that'll continue forward. You know, so you can still get the nonverbals with the verbals.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is a different way. I mean, everyone's love language is a little different. And so some people would prefer the phone call. I personally don't. If you leave me a voicemail, just assume that it went in file 13. But I think that we do have to look at the way people want to be communicated with, and video communication has been kind of cool. There's several, to your point earlier, tools like Drift, like Loom, but there's a lot of these software companies that understand the situation that we're in and that are putting out free licenses right now. So Loom, Loom is one of them, and they're running a basic promotion to where there's free licenses out there that different teams, groups, sales teams, and things like that can be taking advantage, trying it out, seeing if they like that form, and sharpen their skills on something that maybe they weren't using before.
That's a great tip. This is a time where we're all used to change because it's forced upon us. So if you're trying to implement something new, now is actually a pretty good time to do it because it's not going to be disruptive.
I'm hoping, like all these video conferences and webinars that I'm doing, I'm hoping that people have grace for this is not my thing.
Yeah. Good. So let's shift a little bit. You know, as we talk about the crisis itself, as it's hit our teams and things, I know there's a lot of uncertainty in business, and we got questions up ahead of time of how do you market during this time, how do you sell during this time. But I want to start off just with how do we work with our own teams in this time. You know, I think every business is under some form of threat because it's impacted the entire economy in a large way. Some businesses are immediately under threat. I mean, we've seen some clients who have had huge losses of revenue, and others have been less affected, or they're going to be affected slowly. You know, one question was, how do we engage our employees during this? How do we help them to get over their fear of what's going to happen next?
One of the things that I read recently that really resonated with me is that if we focus on the fear, we're looking inward and backwards, as opposed to focusing on the now and how to get better and what the future is going to entail. Even though it's a guessing game right now, it still gives us something to drive forward with. And the other part of that is helping people. When we are helping organizations, helping our communities, helping our peers, even like in our own industry, and sharing best practices. I've had a million mentors out there that have just been instrumental in just throwing things back and forth and seeing like what might be best practice in this time of unknown. It gives us purpose, and purpose gives us energy to kind of get ourselves back together. So I think as fearful as this time is, we can't get caught up in it, and we do have to focus on help and get that energy to trudge forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love that distinction of fear, because that's what hits us first. And I'm going to steal that totally. Like, fear makes us think about ourselves and look backwards, and you get stuck into it. But we're going to feel that. So it's not really get over the fear. It's not like you don't feel the fear, right? Everyone's going to feel that part of it. But what do we do with it? Can we get past that part? Can we do some contingency planning as an organization to think about, if this happens, then we'll have to do this, but get everybody involved in it? I mean, what's the balance on that? Matt, as you work with clients and things, and you see companies are making really tough decisions right now. I mean, they're deciding whether to lay off. Some have already done some furloughs, some layoffs, some really tough decisions. How much do you pull employees in to those decisions?
You know, when we're talking about fear, I think one of the number one drivers of fear is ourself as well, right? And so we, whenever we're you don't have to kind of spell it out for people that this is a different day than it was a few weeks ago, right? So everybody feels that and knows that. I was working with an organization where the owner was doing a good job with her manager level of keeping them in cadence, but the managers were just still having day-to-day tasks for the employees and not really coming in front of them and going, hey, this is where we are. This is what we're doing. This is the outlook. This is what we know. And she said, I haven't done it yet because I don't know the answers to those. And I was like, doesn't matter, right? One of the things that's driving fear is the lack of transparency. I think that we as business leaders or managers, just not even owners of companies, but managers of teams, that you just have to be as transparent as you can be. So, okay, so is it a different day? Yes. Is it kind of nerve-wracking? I get it. Like stress, anxiety, those types of things are there, and we're not doing ourselves any favors if we don't necessarily talk about it at the same time. And the thing, and Don, we've said it a bunch with People Centric, but we think that we're doing them a favor by not just addressing the elephant in the room and being as transparent as we can be, painting a picture for this is where maybe our financials are, this is where our workload is, this is where, the outlook for the next 30 days, this is our contingency plan, those types of things, which I'll give kudos to Don. Don does a great job, whether it's through video conference or emails, he'll bullet point those things out and send them to us. And I think we're all adults. We can kind of take it and we can read it, and then that helps us. The reality is, if Don's not doing that, if Don's not sending those messages out to the team to proactively address those things, then they're thinking of the worst possible case scenario. You ever WebMD anything because you just have a belly ache or something, and then I can't sleep for the rest of the night because I just did that. It's those types of things, those types of interactions where we think we're protecting them by not saying the things that we actually know or maybe are even forecasting or thinking about. But the narrative that they're building is way worse than probably the reality of the situation. So I think the thing that drives fear is our own brain. We just tend to go to our worst place, immediately. And so if you're a manager of people, if you're a leader of an organization, be as transparent as you can be in this time. And I think we'll be much more likely to take that message.
Love that, Matt. We're firm believers that if you allow people to have voids in their minds, they get to fill it with whatever they want. And a lot of times, to your point, it is way worse than the actual bad news. Brock, I'm going to call him out really quick because it's interesting. I tend to think that we're a pretty transparent company and open book, and bad to good. Nobody can help us out through opportunities or through things that are concerning better than our own team. So we do feel as leaders like we communicate well. But I got a phone call one night early on, or maybe a text, maybe a call. Some fear, just what does this look like? And so just kind of scenario, Brock, like what was going through your head? What did we feel as a leader or as a company that thinks we're transparent? And getting that messaging across from your perspective.
Yeah, so basically what she's trying to be really nice. I had a freak out session. I just kind of got lost in my own thoughts, and it ran away from me. I watched the news too much, and things kind of got away from me. And so, instead of, I talked to my wife about it, and, and my dad, and they can't make me feel any better. And so I finally just decided I'm just going to address this, and so I did. I reached out to Chelsey and to Lee both, and I just said, I'm concerned because I don't, like you guys said, at the absence of information, people are going to fill that void. They're going to fill in the gaps. Like if you don't tell the story, somebody else. And they were doing a great job of telling us the story, but human nature is still to find the gaps, even if it's a small one. So they could fill 98 out of 100 gaps, and I find those two, and I'm like, oh yeah, what about these two? And so I think it was really important for them to hear that from me, to not only know that, hey, if one person's willing to say it, there's probably 10 that aren't willing to say that, that are just kind of sitting there and maybe they don't feel comfortable just reaching out to the president of the company and saying, do I have a job tomorrow, basically, or what are we doing, which is kind of what I did. But also, it comes in waves, and understanding the different personalities. I know that, there's days when I wake up and I'm energetic. Lee talked about, the new wearing off. It's like, okay, this is great. We got a lot of momentum. And then there's days where you get caught up, watching the news, or you hear about layoffs in your industry, and, you start getting nervous, And so I don't think it's a, as Matt was saying, it's not just a one shot, hey, I'm just going to send you an email and tell you guys, hey, this is where we're at. We're good. Because this stuff is changing on a daily basis. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And so, after those conversations, they helped kind of talk me off the ledge. And then what I noticed them immediately do is turn around and make sure that everybody in the company felt that comfort that I did. And they started talking about our long-term goals, and it brought everybody together. Hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to focus on when this thing is over. When this thing is over, what's going to be our strategy for hitting this as hard as we can? Let's get everything geared up now. And so just kind of that refocus was really what I needed and was what a lot of people needed. So, and it does.
Here's the brilliant part, I think, too, about what Brock is talking about, because, not only is it important to be able to relay the message, but it's also important to create the space. And when we say create the space, we also mean, okay, so these, as a leader, these are the things I think that you might need to know and be aware of. But then I also need to ask the question and say, what are the questions that you have that I'm not answering? And be able to create that space, too. And here's the other cool part about it is, a month ago, unless I'm speaking out of turn, this wasn't a thing, right? We weren't partnering with Pearson-Kelly to be able to come together for a webinar to talk about this stuff, right? So in the confines of stress and in the confines of strain and things like that, brilliance is also, I'm not saying this is brilliant, probably is brilliant, and I think we're brilliant, but brilliant things happen because you're forced kind of in that situation. And Brock, probably the first thing that you told Chelsey is the same thing that I told Dawn and the rest of our team whenever we're hearing that. The first thing out of our mouths is, okay, so what do you need from me? What can I do? Those types of things. And I think we are taking that opportunity away from our employees if we don't create the space to be able to have that conversation. If we try to protect them and guard them, then we get frustrated because they're not doing enough to help. But you haven't been transparent with the message. So now that we're transparent, the employee most likely, if they're a pretty good employee, is going to say, what do you need from me? That's outside of my normal scope, maybe we normally do.
Yeah, you can just see, Brock, that was awesome, you sharing that with everybody, because you were doing what Matt talked about, is that transparency and that vulnerability. Now, you did that because Chelsey kind of called you out on it, but what's cool is listening to that. When you listen to that, like even as I listen to that, because nobody on this call has had all but good days since for the last 3 or 4 weeks, right? There's moments of like, okay, this is going to be fine. This is a challenge. Let's go after this. And there's times where you're like, holy crap, what are we going to do? This is going to have a huge impact on people. We're on calls every day where we're talking to people who are, we're doing okay, or we're not doing so good. We had to lay off some people. It's rough. Like sometimes it's rough. But one of the things that we get comfort in as humans is that, okay, it's bad that everyone's going through this together. It's also really good that everyone's going through this together. So when somebody like Brock speaks out and says, hey, look, I've had moments where I don't know where we're at and I don't have the answers to this, and this is how I feel about it. It feels better for us as humans to know that we're not in this alone, that other people feel that way too. So if you're a leader wrestling with that, like how much do I bring my employees in? Like they might fear for their job, and think about what their future is and all that stuff. Look, they're already thinking that. And by you sometimes, Matt, you said like answer questions. Sometimes as a leader, you have to recognize the answer to the question might not be, it's X. We're going to do this, 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 and then everything's going to be fine. Sometimes the answer might be, I don't know. I think this sucks too. I don't like this either. I'm with you.
I think employees that have a leader that shows humility and says, I'm not 100% sure of the answer, but here's some potential scenarios. I think employees still value that answer. I think we feel like we have to have the solid answer when sometimes you don't. Like, just tell me what you're thinking. And then what do I need to do to help?
Chelsey and I are ranked number 1 and number 2 in our region for being the humblest leaders. I don't know if anybody knew that. We've got plaques for that.
Who's 1 and 2?
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That was the bus that just hit me. All right. Looks like you moved into second.
I think that one of the things that I've not done a good job with, that I anticipated I would do a better job doing, are little individual check-ins and things that were maybe not as business focused. I have a really hard time, people that know me know this, getting myself off of business, but really having that personal one-on-one check-in with different people, different departments, just seeing how they're doing. And it doesn't have to be about business, because you'd mentioned we're all in this together. One of our employees even posted on Facebook, and I just loved it. I took a screenshot, and it was like, we're all in the same boat. but we're weathering different storms. Some are in a sprinkle, some are in a torrential downpour, some are in hurricanes right now. And sometimes it's hard to lose sight depending on which storm you're in. Granted, yes, we're in the same boat, but what are others doing and what's going around them? Because Pearson-Kelly is like my firstborn baby, so it's hard for me to get off that sometimes, and I need to have that personal touch better than what I've done. And I think there's a lot of leaders that are doing a great job at doing just that.
Yeah, that's hard to do. I know as in a crisis, we love our team, we love our company. So like, I know my first instinct is to circle the wagons. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to come out with all the answers. And then when you can't do that, it's frustrating. But then whenever you start to communicate with your team a little bit and talk and share that and say like, I don't have the answers for all this, then it feels better because everybody is in it together. We did an interview with a psychologist, Dr. Jennifer Baker, last week, and it's gotten a lot of interest. And she talked about how we're all grieving in different phases of grieving and different grieving. Some people because they lost their jobs, some people because they've lost their companies. I mean, I talked to a guy yesterday who shut down his business. I mean, it can happen. I mean, he let a 72-year business and closed it. I mean, it's a horrible story. But you know, some of us are just missing because graduation, our kids won't get to walk in a graduation, or a band trip got canceled, or I had this great strategic plan for our business that we all worked really hard on, and now it's all messed up. I mean, there's all the spectrum, but it all impacts us as humans, and we all have to acknowledge that, and we have to acknowledge it together. And there's a lot of comfort in that. So being transparent and open with each other about that is hard. And I'm with you, Chelsey. Sometimes I'd rather just like create the kick-ass spreadsheet and this is what the plan is, and here's how we're going to move forward with it. But those conversations are really important. Let's transition a little bit into that. So you talked about, you know, the fear side of things overcoming us. One of the questions that came out early is like, how do you model what's going to happen in this crisis? Like, how do we know? How do you plan? I talked to a business owner yesterday, said, we've been planning like crazy. We're planning for 3 o'clock today. And then tomorrow we'll plan for 3 o'clock again. And that's how we're planning. But how do you plan or think about the future right now when it's almost day by day?
For us, it's interesting. I mean, again, it's a guessing game. I think that question was posed by my buddy out of Little Rock, Joel, and he's kind of going through. We've talked a few times, a lot of the same dialogue that all of us in the office equipment industry are going through. And you know, our programs are developed based on trying to sell to outcomes. What outcomes are our clients seeking? How do we develop programs to address that? Well, those outcomes that they're seeking after this is all over look a little different. And so we're kind of in discovery mode right now saying, okay, what are the priorities going to look like? What are those needs? How can we be helpful? And how can we throw everything that we knew yesterday out the window essentially and redesign our offering base to address just that? So we're internally going through a lot of dialogue. I don't have all the answers, but I definitely think a good focus, and Brock, you can kind of speak to this a little bit more, but a good focus is going to be on mobility and disaster strategies, because most companies had some things in place, but I think most companies are in the same boat where we're all looking and saying, wow, I didn't anticipate this gap, or I didn't anticipate this process that maybe needed to be defined better, or wow, we're going through our contingency planning on expense reduction and we had a lot of fat that probably needed to be shed anyway, and now it's exposed. And so I think that all of those internal conversations are bringing a lot of things to light that can help us all as businesses tighten up, and things that probably should have been discussed prior to this point. But now we have some opportunity to do that. And then if you listen to the economists, they're saying this could happen again in the fall or the next 18 months. And so I think that we not only need to do this because we're reacting to what's happened today, but this may not be an isolated incident, and we need to be cognitive of that.
Yeah. So what is that discovery? You talked about discovery. I like that. You kind of talked about two different types of discovery. There's the external discovery of listening to your clients so that you're discovering what is going to happen, because they're discovering it too. So the world is changing super, super fast outside, and we're just watching it and observing that. But then you also talked about this internal discovery of looking under, inside the business, kind of behind the seat. I mean, I know you've got kids and stuff, where you find the French fries and stuff that have been there for months sometimes, under the seats, and it's gross. let's talk about how do you do that external discovery first? What kinds of things can we be doing to discover what's happening with our customers? That's for anybody.
So I think I can speak to a little bit of that because, well, first off, I think my next 12 to 18 months is made for me because, you know, where we deal with folks that are resistant to, you know, investing in IT or streamlining IT or, hey, I've got a guy, he's kind of our computer guy, he helps us out. Well, you know, and we're trying to talk about security and best practices. And, you know, I'm literally telling you, whenever I go in and I start talking about business continuity and disaster recovery, people's eyes just glaze over. Nobody wants to talk about that. And I have a feeling that's going to be completely different following this. People are going to realize that in a snap of a finger, we need to be able to work, like Chelsey said, from anywhere at any given point. And, you know, and there's a lot of places in the world that have already gone to this outside of this crisis, like this, you know, hey, I can work from a coffee shop, I can work from home, I can work from the office, I can work from the road. And so I think, you know, as we kind of rediscover what our clients' needs are, it's going to be really important to find out when they did these changes over the past couple of weeks, what needs to stick and what needs to go. Like, what did they like about this and what did they hate about this? Because we're gonna expose a lot of pains. Those folks with, you know, not to get too technical, but with those folks with old servers and old firewalls that they just been limping around and, you know, they don't want to invest in it, are the ones that struggled to get everybody VPN'd and to get everybody mobile, you know, and it's been weeks and they lost productivity. And so now I think it's kind of one of those things where they're going to realize, hey, this is a valuable asset. We need to be able to be adaptable. And I think our whole focus is not going to be just on, you know, one deliverable. We're going to manage your IT and make sure everything's good, but we're going to help you as a business become adaptable to any situation that comes up. And it's a whole new talk track for us. And so, you know, I think this discovering that is going to be, it's just going to be really valuable for us as a company.
Yeah. It's going to be harder to put it into a box and just deliver it and say, here's the service that I think you wanted. That adaptable box is going to have to change itself. Sorry, go ahead, Chelsey.
I was going to say, I mean, and he mentioned people like with trying to get, you know, old servers to have VPN access. It's one thing to like shift to mobility. It's another to be secure. I mean, have you seen all the people trying to take advantage of hacking in this crisis? I mean, we're dealing with people using their personal devices and taking things out of a normal, you know, business infrastructure and trying to spin up at their own personal home. That's probably, I mean, there's one time I jumped on my second grader's Chromebook, you know, just trying to get internet access. And so there's just a lot more, they're in student-led homeschooling upstairs right now. But there's just a lot of discussion surrounding this that I think is very necessary and things that we're going to have to get serious about as a business community.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think in terms of like the external discovery, in terms of talking with clients and like Brock, you said something, I think it was kind of important. You said it like, I think it's just part of who you are, but I've heard people struggle a little bit of like, what can I sell right now? And I think you're not really selling at this point. You're more listening, right? Not just clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like Matt, what kinds of things are you hearing from clients in terms of their adaptability or how we could discover more about that?
Well, first of all, to Brock's point, like you're going to have a captive audience with something that's relative in their life now. You know, before you weren't able to really have that conversation, and I don't need to say it again what you just said, but you're definitely on the right track there of meeting people where they are, and everybody's in the same place right now. And so I think you will have a captive audience to that. I think that even once this is through, once we start getting back to the office, you know, I'm reading several articles that say, listen, once this is over, it doesn't just go back to pre-coronavirus, right? It doesn't go back to where we were. Like, it's just different now. And so I think the companies that are really going to thrive are the ones that are going to embrace that, you know, and embrace that difference and get ahead of that difference. So the things that we were selling before might not even be high priority for them. So that should be those types of things of, you know, maintaining the relationship, selling for not today but tomorrow. But then also the other part of that is understanding, be sensitive to the situation and the things that they just came out of. So I can talk to a relevant party of and meet them where they are, and then have the conversation based off of where they are instead of what I think that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge. So I think right now, I mean, the punchline from all of that, I think, is we should be listening to our clients and our potential customers right now as a marketing strategy so that we can create something around that and create solutions for them that are going to meet their needs, that are going to be, but they're going to be flexible. I think you're absolutely right. Flexible and adaptive solutions for sure. Let's talk about the discovery internally now. You talked about looking inside and under the covers and weird places to try to figure out what things can we save as companies or plan or do contingency planning. What are some good tips for that? We have no good tips as a panel. That's it. That's all we have.
We just have tips at Pearson-Kelly. We don't have good tips.
Just tips.
I think as you're trying to strategize and move forward there, I think one, involve your people as you're doing it. So as you're developing the strategy, involve the people in the strategy to do that as much as you can, because they're walking through this at the same time as you. So even if your tendency is to kind of get in a room by yourself and knock it out, then just display the plan as the ink dries to everybody. I have all of the answers here. Maybe a good point is to involve the people as you're trying to develop what success looks like moving forward. And that's another thing that we've talked about quite a bit too, is how you're defining success might be different. The definition of success pre-coronavirus versus the definition of success now is probably different. And so, getting together with your group to be able to redefine what that might look like, I think would be huge.
Agreed.
Yeah, I heard somebody share that. So you're trying to survive today. Like the game right now is getting through it so that you can see what it is and then planning for whatever it becomes so that you can thrive into that next step.
Absolutely. So our office, kind of what we've done, right, wrong, or indifferent, we had our leadership team kind of come up with a contingency plan. Step one, how do we cut expenses if it looks like, we're at the at-home stay order for the next 30 days. And then I personally put together kind of a plan B, plan C, and plan D, looking 6 months out. What if we have to survive on cash only? And regardless of what we can invoice, what if nobody pays us? And what does that look like? When is it game over, essentially, assuming that we get no loans or anything like that. So that's extreme. But it's always nice to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So I think a lot of planning, but then it went bigger than that. And Matt, to your point, one thing that I really liked is that we got great ideas from leadership on here's where we can cut expenses. Here's what I think our department needs to be doing. Here's some fat we can shed. And before we implemented that, I shot out some messaging to the entire company and said, what are your ideas? And we had so many ideas that we hadn't even thought of as a leadership that were better than what we could have ever come up with on our own. So not only did we get, in my perception, buy-in because they're part of the solution, they're helping us with the solution, they're eager to shave fat that may not have even needed to be shaved at that point. And it really bonded us. So I do think opening it up, getting ideas, people at the front lines usually have better ideas than leadership teams, frankly. I mean, I like my team, but it was fun. And then I think, Brock, you mentioned yesterday, if you want to touch a little bit on documentation, I think we've seen some internal opportunities to document maybe better priority of key employees and applications that they're using and different passwords and restrictions like that we probably needed to have addressed a bit better. We do a really good job for our clients and don't always attack ourselves the same way.
Yeah, I mean, not just from an IT perspective, but from a business perspective, it's a really good chance also as we're running around and trying to figure out how to adapt, but also to hone in on all of our standard operating procedures. So maybe some things that's like, hey, we just need to get better at this, or if I just had time to write up a plan for this, well, we've got that time now. I know our IT support team is still, they're as busy as they've ever been. But there's other folks that do have time now to pitch in and say, okay, let's take a look at some of the core processes, some of the documentation of our infrastructure and our security practices, and it's given us that kind of reset to say, let's get this right. Because when this thing does, like Matt said, it's not just going to click, it's not just going to be done. but there is going to be a mad rush at some point where people are just going to go crazy. They're going to be out and about. They're going to be doing things. They're going to be taking on initiatives. They're going to be, like Chelsey said, maybe getting ready for if there's something coming in the fall. Like, we need to be ready for that to support what they need. And so it's a really good opportunity for us to, you know, get any of the fires that we had put out, you know, catch up on projects, but really get all of our SOPs just really lined up well so we can scale and make those repeatable. I'm all about repeatable processes. Documentation helps that all the time. Like, document what you do, document what you change. Let's have, you know, change management. It really, really is going to help us moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that, you know, your point, Chelsey, too, when you talked about getting your leadership team involved and making those changes. And then, you know, Brock, you talked about documenting those things. That presumes that your team knows something about your financials in the first place. You know, we implemented the Great Game of Business at Centric last year. That's been hugely helpful for us this year because we've been able to really get everybody involved and everybody knows what the financial game is that we're playing. I know that's really good. And then I really liked the point too that you talked about in terms of contingency planning. You're trying to forecast for what's going to happen. Don't try to forecast or make one guess on what's going to happen. I like the idea of setting like the milestones. Like, if we get to here, then we put this into place. So you have different like levels of contingencies that would occur based on what happens. And not all of them have to be negative. It could be what happens if you go out and do what Brock talked about. You're listening to the customers and they start seeing technology. There could be a boom for some businesses when this thing turns back on. And you might have to figure out how you're going to adjust for that. So that's also a contingency type planning thing to put out there too. That's important to keep that in mind. Okay, we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here together. One thing I did want to hit, that's kind of a relatively quick question. I know we did have a question just about, I know Zoom has been questioned about security sides of that. Any tips on that in terms of what we can do in terms of the security as we're working from home?
Use Teams.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. First off, Zoom's kind of gotten a little bit of, I don't want to say a bad rep, but there is a lot of platforms out there. Zoom grew, I can't remember the number, but it was exponential overnight. And they got, you know, some of their vulnerabilities were exposed pretty quick. They've reacted. They've also put out some updates. So there's some best practices. And honestly, I think it really comes back to the conversation of not just in this crisis, but just best practices in security in general. You know, whenever you do meetings or whenever you send links or how are you doing those? Are you encrypting those? Are you making these things public to where anybody can join? Are you locking down your meetings after they start so no new people can jump in the meeting? All these different things really come into play. So this is not a new problem. Like, people in the information security world, we have a guy at our office that we love to give a hard time, but he has a knack for finding the break point in anything. I mean, anything. You show him something and be like, oh yeah, this is how this can break. And understanding that you got to embrace those folks, because that's how you protect your investments, you protect your people, you protect your reputation, not just now, but all the time. So take it seriously, you know, understand that there's a lot of different opportunities out there. You've got people working from home. I could just speak for some of the things that we've experienced. A lot of the folks that provide, whether it be ransomware protection or antivirus, are being really adaptable right now, as Chelsey said, and they're saying, hey, we're expanding this to your home devices for free right now. We'll figure this all out when it's done, but we want everybody to be protected. So ask those questions, you know, for those companies out there, you know, whether you have your own IT or somebody else's, ask, like, hey, can I get a license for this stuff at home to protect me at home? But yeah, Zoom did have some issues. They were exposed. Some of them are pretty horrifying. But I think it's really important to, you know, keep all your software up to date and just practice good security practices regardless of whether you're at home or you're in the office. Don't ever have that false sense of security.
Yeah. So the message there is, whatever tool you're using, make sure you're using it properly and leveraging the security that's already inherent in the tool. Because when they put it out, they thought about some of those things. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Let's wrap this up. What I'd love to do is just go around and quick. What's your tip for crushing the crisis? Give us one tip for what you think we should do to crush the crisis. Who wants to go first?
I'll go. We didn't get to talk about it, but Paige just put it out there on the chat. And I think this is also important. I just responded to Paige there too. She said, I think that this time has exposed how much our culture and relationships affects our success, both internally and externally. And sometimes, you know, especially as things are changing every day, we're not seeing each other, we're working remotely, all of a sudden it can become really task and culture kind of goes out the window. But I think this is a perfect time to be able to really leverage your culture, the strong culture that you've worked to build with the wonderful people that you have. And whenever things do kind of resume back to where we are meeting regularly at the office again, hopefully if you found that people didn't react the way that you wanted them to react, or culture was not the way that you wanted it to be, then I think take some time in investing in what those processes and systems that lead to your overall awesome culture might be that were glaring during this time too. So just because we're working remotely, like I put it out there, doesn't mean culture takes a back seat. That's true.
Yeah, that's great.
I agree with Matt. For us, we had to take a deep breath and go back to what is our vision, what are our core values, what are our we believes, and get back to getting that head trash, getting the news out of our head, and just owning who we are as an organization and as a group, and what, you know, has made us who we are today. And then from there, the culture side, we do a virtual happy hour every day. If you follow our company, Pearson-Kelly Technology, or myself on LinkedIn or Facebook, you'll see some of the fun that we're having. And not to make light of a bad situation, but you have to take the time to play this up and have some fun with it, and at least take a moment each day to put a smile on everyone's face. And so we've got themes that encourage positivity, whether it's a productive project that you've accomplished during this work from home state, or if it's one great thing, or this week we did, who are you the biggest cheerleader for on your team? Somebody else, you know, and there were lots of interdepartment accolades thrown left and right, and that was one of our probably best ones. But we also dress up and we have fun and it's goofy, and I think that you do have to focus on what got you here, who are you at the core, and do something to add some flair.
Yeah, love that. Brock?
Yeah, for me, I think it's both of those things, but I thrive in focusing on the opportunities, you know, and it's kind of like looking, maybe it's just the optimist in me, but trying to find the ways that I can improve personally, and that I can help the business improve or help my team improve, because I think those things will translate really well and really easily to whatever style of business we have to do tomorrow or a month from now. So really, and you know, and that day that I called Chelsey was a day I wasn't focusing on opportunities. I was looking backwards and I was focusing on the fear. And so it gave me a good reset to kind of focus on, okay, there's going to be a ton of opportunity through this, whether it's business-wise or personally. Looking at the time that, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes hearing the kids laugh in the other room, I mean, it's, you're, you know, those things are important, and we're never, you know, they're going to remember this forever. We're going to remember this forever. So focusing on all those little opportunities is really how I get through a crisis like this.
I like that. We've been talking about how to work from home, but maybe we should figure out how to home from work more, right? That's trademark, by the way. Just kind of, yeah, I mean, I think I love that this discussion's been fantastic. I've had great takeaways from it too. I think that, you know, we have to confront that fear at the beginning. That fear is normal. The anger, the whole grieving process, we all have to go through some of that. Whether you're, you know, just dealing with the loss of being thrown out from off your plan a little bit, to, you know, actually getting sick or knowing somebody who's been sick. You know, whatever that is, we have to get past that fear by putting together a plan for how we're going to deal with it. But then we can pivot on that and say, now, what are some of the opportunities out there? And really, the opportunities are that are best out there, like Brock, you said, is to go back of who we are as leaders. Say we don't have all the answers, but let's be who we are, the best that we can be in terms of a team, and go out there and be who we are, and then serve that to the world. How can we help other people? Which, Chelsey, I think you said at the very beginning of the call, just start helping other folks. What can we do to serve others? I think that's great in terms of getting through that. So thank you everyone for participating in this. Appreciate it. Thanks to Pearson-Kelly for having this great idea and inviting us onto this webinar too. Thank you, Brock. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chelsey. Appreciate your time. If anybody has any other questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to help, or if you want to jump on a call, if you have any other questions, please reach out to us as well. I know there are lots of resources that are available on Pearson-Kelly's website, as well as on peoplecentric.com. So make sure you check those out too, in terms of some of the resources that we've talked about. So thanks everybody for your time today, and we will see you soon.